Formula 1 is often described as being high-speed chess, trying to be one step ahead of the bloke in front or behind at all times, maybe even 2 steps ahead, or a whole race ahead, trying to outfox them at every opportunity, denying someone the chance to enter the pits when they need to get an advantage with tyres or track position. It could mean the difference between second and first come the end. Now, in the good old days, teams were able to put in fuel and change tyres at the same time. This would often lead to some varying strategies come race day depending on where the car was. If the car was first on the grid at a track where it's very difficult to overtake, you could fill the car up quite heavy with fuel and have the guy behind destroy his tyres trying to get past. At a track where it's easy to overtake, you could put in less fuel to build a gap. So in this era, you would see 2 stop strategies at a minimum, really. That seemed to be the sweet spot of speed relative to tyre wear. Heavier car, more tyre wear. Lighter car, less time before stops. I guess the best way to describe it is it's the most efficient way of doing it. Sometimes they'd pull off a 3-stop if the race called for it, but really you'd only see this if there was some sort of safety car intervention. But a 3-stop under green is what Ross Brawn had planned for Michael Schumacher during the 1998 Hungarian Grand Prix. Also, period photos very hard to come by here, so I might just put up shots of lots of different Schumacher Ferraris. If that's alright, I mean, he has got quite literally a lot of fans. The 1998 season was the first season of the Hakkinen vs Schumacher battles. The year before it had been red vs blue with Schumacher and Villeneuve, but this year he had a new challenger, the third in 4 years. The McLaren was absolutely rapid but fragile, while Michael was able to take advantage of unlimited testing at Ferrari's Fiorano test track to extract everything he could from the car. As a result, the Ferrari was able to pick up where Hakkinen's car had faltered, but Ferrari must have been looking at the results and being a little worried that Schumacher had only beaten Hakkinen without some sort of mechanical intervention on his McLaren 3 times all season: Silverstone, Argentina and Manicourt. This is facts. The McLaren was rapid that year. It was 1998's Lotus 49. And prior to the Hungarian Grand Prix, Ferrari had spent 6 days straight at Fiorano doing testing, as was common in those days, as Ferrari would test at home. McLaren and Williams were able to go to Barcelona, Jerez, Paul Ricard and Estoril, while the other teams would split the bill at Silverstone. It seems a completely alien world now compared to today, where it's just 3 days and that's your lot. And in the last video I did about the Nyck de Vries situation, I posted how Jacques Villeneuve was probably the best prepared F1 rookie in history, with all of the time he got versus Mick Schumacher in 2021. But either way, even with all of the testing, Ferrari was still feeling like it was on the back foot versus the McLarens. Hungary should have suited the Goodyear runners, much like Buenos Aires had. Goodyear had brought a new spec of tyre for that race and it had worked quite well there, as the top 6 in that race had been an even split of Team Yellow and Team White. Schumacher, Irvine and Alesi on Goodyears, and the 2 McLarens and Alex Wurz on the Bridgestones. And while the Adrian Newey McLarens were still the class of the field, the Goodyear runners were heavily concentrated at the top end of the grid for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Hakkinen and DC in first and second on Bridgestones, but then Schumacher, Hill, Irvine, JV and Frentzen all on Goodyears, and Schumacher 3/10 off the McLarens and a huge chunk of time ahead of Hill's Jordan. Meanwhile, Ricardo Rosset failed to qualify, with his Tyrrell nearly a full second outside the 107% cut-off point, 6 seconds behind Hakkinen. Which is funny really, because the previous year it had been the other way around. The Bridgestones tended to last longer than the Goodyears and were absolutely awful on cooler tracks, but when it was hot they could get the heat in pretty well. It explains the 1997 Hungarian Grand Prix when Damon was leading in a car that had no right to be there, leading against the likes of Villeneuve and the Michael, who were shredding their Goodyears. Basically, at that time the Bridgestone soft was the Goodyear hard. Hakkinen also had a 16-point lead going into this race, a points advantage that could easily be reduced to 6 points if the McLaren failed to finish and Michael won. Remember, in these days, 10 points for a win, 6 for second, and then 4, 3, 2, 1 down to 6th. And as we've established, cars broke down way more often than they do today. The race began, and as expected, the 2 McLarens went off into the lead. Hakkinen was cruising up front with Coulthard in behind, while Michael was able to hang about a second further back. But the Hungaroring, it's virtually impossible to overtake, so Ross Brawn on the Ferrari pit wall had to come up with something different and radical if Ferrari was going to get the maximum amount of points. At this rate, 6 points would be the goal and the realistic maximum given the pace of the McLarens. So with Schumacher so far ahead of the car in 4th, Brawn pulled him in on lap 25, having made the decision some time before. But to avoid giving the game away to McLaren that Ferrari was switching Schumacher's strategy, Ferrari filled him up as if he was going to do the accepted 2-stop strategy. This brought Schumacher out behind his old mate Villeneuve and was held up for the next 6 laps. Coulthard pitted the lap after Schumacher, while Hakkinen pitted 2 laps after that. JV meanwhile didn't pit until lap 31, which put Schumacher 7.5 seconds off Hakkinen when Hakkinen finally rejoined the track. Now released from the back of the Williams that was the same colour as his Ferrari, Michael started banging in fast laps, about half a second faster than anything the 2 cars ahead of him could do. So between lap 31 when Villeneuve pitted and lap 35, the gap had shrunk to about 3.6 seconds to Hakkinen, but Michael was now on the back of DC. For Brawn on the pit wall, this was excellent news. The Goodyears were hanging on better than the Bridgestones, but the problem still was the conditions had to be right to actually make the Ferrari better in race trim. But this race was brilliant for gathering data they could use for the remaining races. For 10 laps Michael was stuck behind Coulthard, and on lap 43 he was in again, making it look to McLaren that the 2-stopper was still happening. Coulthard pitted the lap after, but because Michael had been so fast on his outlap, he managed to undercut the Scot with a 6.8 second stop. So now he was free to chase down Hakkinen. When Hakkinen pitted, Brawn told Michael that he needed to pull out at least 25 seconds over the next 19 laps. Michael said, "Okay, thank you," which to any other person would translate to, "Are you mental?" McLaren had seen Michael take the lead but didn't think the car or its tyres could hang on long enough to maintain that pace, and at some point the car would start slowing down as the tyres started to drop off from being hammered that hard. McLaren, being on Bridgestones, wouldn't have really known what they could and couldn't do in the same way they knew what the Bridgestones could. I mean, they would have known stuff about the Goodyears, but not known what Brawn & Co knew, because it wasn't their tyres. Those qualifying laps had to continue until the Michael's final stop. He'd got into the lead, but if he didn't build the lead, then Hakkinen would take it back and the strategy would not have been pulled off. Okay, a second place would have been good, but to outscore Hakkinen would have been even better. Schumacher even went off the road pushing hard but got away with it, and pitted for the final time 29 seconds ahead of Mika. With fresher, better wearing tyres, he just had to go off into the distance. Now this is not me saying, oh, he only won because this happened. Ferrari had an advantage, in this case with the tyres, and exploited it. They caught McLaren with their pants down that day. It got even better for Michael as Hakkinen started slowing down with a problem and dropped from 2nd all the way back to 6th. So instead of overhauling him by 4 points, he overhauled him by 9, and at the end of the race Schumacher won from Coulthard, who was followed home by Villeneuve, Hill, Frentzen and Hakkinen, who finished a lap down. 4 of the top 6 Goodyear runners. Good day out for Team Yellow, but their best result of the year would be at the next race, which has its 25th anniversary the end of next month. After the race, Schumacher said, "I thought we would be competitive today, but I didn't even dream of leaving Hungary just 7 points behind in the championship, and all the hard work on a 6-day test in Fiorano paid off. The team has again chosen the right strategy, although at first I was not sure whether our plan would work because I got stuck behind Jacques and David. Of course we benefited from the problems of our rivals, though I was able to keep up pace with the McLarens during the race." It's moments like this that show how deadly that team was going to be when things worked as they should. Ferrari was now showing serious intent, and now people could see if they couldn't beat McLaren on outright pace, they could do it by just outsmarting them. And they still had time to overhaul Hakkinen by the end of the season. Spa, Monza, Nürburgring and Suzuka left. We touched on the race in Spa, but after Monza, they were definitely back in it. So then, a look at the time when Ferrari didn't completely the bed with strategy. If this has been new to you or clarified something you've heard about 100 times before, then do like the video so I know I've done a good job, and for more like this, get subscribed with the bell on so you never miss out. Massive thanks to the kind folk at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help support me on a more personal level, you can do so by following the link in the description, where there's links to Discord, socials, the F1 Store affiliate link, and super thanks if you just want to buy me a beer. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.